Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk about a small feature or a topic within Salesforce that I believe is underutilized and very, very valuable, and that is of custom settings. Now, custom settings come in two types, hierarchy and list, and we'll cover the difference between the two, as well as how to use both of them. Now, I've written a blog post that's super detailed about this, and I'm going to link to that in the description. So if you want a more detailed description of these two types of custom settings, definitely check that out. It'll give you kind of more of the theory behind it. Whereas in this video, we're going to focus on the actual usage. So I'm going to show two examples. One is how to create a hierarchy setting, fill it with some data, and then use it within an Apex class. And then more or less the same, how to create a list setting, how to fill it with data using Workbench to load that data, that static list data, and then again, how to reference it within an Apex class. These are super useful, especially for developers. But one of, I think, the best features or one of the best functionalities of custom settings is that they allow a non-technical administrator or a non-technical user to be able to make changes to potentially an Apex class, because we can use an Apex class to draw from these settings, and yet they're presented with a UI that's simple and familiar to users. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so first things first, I'm just going to log into Salesforce. Now, once I'm inside of Salesforce, in the menu, I'm going to search for schema, because the first thing I need to do is go to schema settings here on the left-hand side, and I need to make sure that this is enabled. By default, it was actually disabled in my org. So now I can use custom settings of the type list. So I'm going to search custom settings. I'm going to click on that at that entry there. And now if I click the new button, I can make a new custom settings. So I'm going to give this a label and a name, and the label I'm going to choose is form settings. And the object name is also just form settings, but of course it's with an underscore. And I'm going to keep this as type hierarchy. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save. And now I can create a custom field or custom fields. So I'm going to create a checkbox, and I'm going to click next. And I'm going to call this display form. So if this is checked, we're going to display the form for the user. And by default, I'm going to leave it unchecked. Click next and save. All right. One more custom field. I'm going to click new. I'm going to make this type text, and I'm going to call this one form title. So I want to make this the title of the form. Maybe I want to change it based on the user, not sure. Anyways, required. Next, and save. Okay, so I have my basic form settings, custom settings object set up. Now, if I go to the developer console, what I can do is I can query for this setting. It now exists as a setting, and it's available to me. So if I go to the query editor, and let's zoom in here to make it a little easier to see. If I go to the query editor and I say select ID, display form _C, form title _C from form settings _C, and I execute, I can query that table. Now it's returning nothing, so I'm going to go back to my settings. I'm going to click manage, because I need to make an instance. Now I have two new buttons. One is for global org defaults, and one is based on the user's profile. So I'm going to make an org default. I'm going to check display form, and I'm going to give it a title of sign up form and save. Okay, so now we have an object. We go back to our dev console, we click refresh grid, and there we go. We get our ID, we get display form, and we get the form title. Okay, so now let's open up the anonymous Apex editor by pressing Control E. And let's write out some code here. So I want to get the ID of the logged in user. So I'm going to basically create a query that selects the ID from the profile where the ID of the user is equal to the logged in user's profile ID. Now I have this method that I can use called formSettings.getInstance. And if I leave it empty, it'll get the org-wide instance. If I put in the ID of a profile, it'll get a user specific one. Okay? So now I'm just going to debug those two that I've set up, and we can see them both. And oh, looks like I hit an error. I forgot to pull the ID, so it was returning a list. So I'm going to put .id there, execute it again. All right, and as soon as this loads, I will check debug only to see my debug statements. And there we go. It's returned those two objects. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to create another setting, but of the type list. So I'm going to go back to my custom settings menu, and I'm going to click on custom settings, and I'm going to click on new again. Now, this time I'm going to name it US States, and I'm going to give it an object name that's the same but with an underscore, and I'm going to choose the type list. Okay, so I'll save this, and now all I need to do is make a custom field, and the custom field I'm going to make is called code, and this is going to be like the 2-letter mailing code of the state, right? So for California, it's CA, for Texas, it's TX, etc. So I'm going to make it length 2, required, and unique. There shouldn't be any duplicate values. I'm going to click next, I'm going to click save, and there we go. So I already have a standard field called name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open Workbench, and I've already made videos on Workbench that I'll link to in the post. And I'm going to do a basic data load. And I also have a file that I'll link to that I'm going to use here. But I'm just going to select insert, and I'm going to select US States, and I'm going to choose my file called US State Data. And as you can see, I have just 2 columns, one with the code and one with the label, which is the name of the state. I'm going to click next, and I need to set up my mapping. So code corresponds with code and name corresponds with label. I'll click map fields, and I'll click confirm insert. All right, so from here, you can see I've created all of those records. If I go back to my settings, you can see all of those records have been created in that custom setting. So now let's jump into the dev console, and let's create a super simple utility class. I'm going to call it states utility here. And I want to just create a utility that returns that class. Okay, so I'll make it a global class, and I'll create a global static function that returns a list of the US states object called getStateData. And I'm just going to return code and name from US states. So let's make sure this query is correct. Let's paste it down here in the query editor. Let's execute it. And there we go. Now it looks like they're out of order. They're not alphabetical. So I want to make them alphabetical really quickly, order by name, ascending. And then let's copy that order by statement. Let's paste it into our query, and let's execute again. And there we go. Now they're in order. So in order to use this utility function, what I can do is I can open up my execute anonymous window. I'm going to remove this extra code in here, and I'm going to say list of US states equals statesutility.getStateData. And now I can just debug that list, click execute, and as soon as this loads, I will show only my debug statements, and there we go. There's all that data available to me in Apex. All right, that's it. Pretty straightforward. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully this was useful to you. If you'd like to download the sample data or again see sort of a more written out description of what we did in the video, check out the blog post. I'm linking to it in the description. And if you have any questions, comments, feedback, etc., leave those in the comments section. If this video was useful to you, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the channel. I appreciate the feedback, and I will try to respond to every comment and question that comes in. Thanks.